To get started on this exercise, we're going to launch Adobe Animate and create a new document from scratch. The size of this document needs to be a full HD size, so 1920 by 1080. We're going to keep the frame rate at 24 frames per second and of course use ActionScript 3 as your platform type. When you say create, this will give us our new document to work on. And as always, we want to make sure you got plenty of area to work on, so I'm going to go up to the top and do show all to show everything in the frame. The next thing we want to do for our document is to change the background color. Rather than keeping our stage just a solid white, you can go over to your Properties panel, to the Document or Doc sub-menu, and locate the stage color. From here, when you select it, you can change it to whatever color is predefined as a swatch. We just want to make it a nice dark gray. This way everything we do will show up really nicely. Also, we're going to be importing some things to our stage. So with layer 1 selected, we can go up to File, down to Import, and let's import the ball lines PNG that you should have downloaded already. We'll say Open. This PNG is already sized to fit your stage, so you shouldn't have to scale it up or down. But we do want to go to our timeline. Let's rename this our path layer. I'm going to lock it down so that we don't accidentally draw on it, and I'm going to right click or control click on it, and I'm going to make this a guide layer. This way it won't show up whenever we do any of our testing. While we're on the path timeline, let's also give it 2 seconds of time. So I'm going to go down to the 2-second mark, hit F5 to insert just a single frame. And so all the lines and the animations that we create should take about 2 seconds to be able to do. The first thing we need to do is to set up a ball that travels along the length of each of these paths, and then it follows the path that we're working on. So we've got 4 different colors. We're going to be doing this 4 different times. Let's start off with just the first red one. Going down to my layer, I'm going to create a new layer. And while we're down here, I'm going to call this my red ball layer. Whoops, let's get rid of that space. So this is where our red ball will be. We can go into our toolbox, grab the oval, and with it selected, go over to your Tool Properties panel and make sure your fill color is set to whatever the color of the line is. In my case, it's red, so I'm just going to make it a red ball. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. And I'm going to remove the stroke because we won't need that for what we're drawing. Now I'm going to simply zoom in by hitting Command and the plus sign, and let's see if we can go over, and I'm going to work just outside of my document area. By holding down Shift, when I click and drag, I can create a simple little ball. With it created, we can select the ball, and let's either right click or control click on it, and let's convert it to a symbol. Now the name of your symbol can be simply the red ball. Make sure the type is a graphic and say OK. Now when I created this, I do see I've made one mistake on my timeline. Be sure whenever you work on your timeline to create these, we want to do this at the very first frame. I can see that I created the ball when I had the 2-second mark still selected. So if this happens to you, the easiest way to fix it is to simply click on the frame and drag it all the way back to the very first frame. This is where it should be to move forward in making your motion path. Next, since we're down in our timeline, let's create a new motion guide that's above the red ball. You can right click or control click on the layer and choose Add Classic Motion Guide. This will add the guide on top of it. Again, make sure your first layer is selected or your first frame is selected in the layer. I'm going to back out. I'm going to use my pencil tool to draw off the path that I want it to move along. If you can't see your pencil tool in here, remember you can always click on the little 3 dots and be able to find it from here. Now I do have my pencil tool, so I'm going to use it. With the pencil tool selected, remember to draw off this line. Just make sure your stroke is relatively thin, and I recommend turning on smooth as the drawing style to work with. We'll start off on one side, and as carefully as you can, try to follow your path. Now if it gets off by just a little bit, that's okay. It doesn't have to be a perfect following of the path. You can see on a couple of little areas here where I got off. It won't matter much for what we're trying to do. Now we can go down to our timeline and let's add 2 keyframes at the very end of each of the timelines. Excuse me. I'll just do one keyframe at the end here and one keyframe at the end for our ball layer. Now, at the very last, at the 2-second mark, let's put our ball at the very end point here. Remember, in order for it to line up with the line and use the motion graphic, we want this white dot to be nice and on the line. So I'm going to set it to be right there. I'm also going to back out. Let's go back to our first keyframe where our ball is at the beginning, and let's align the ball to the beginning of our line. Again, making sure that that white dot is aligned to there. Now I can return to my timeline and select my first keyframe. When we right click on it, we're going to add a classic tween between it. And also with this first keyframe selected, let's go over to our properties panel, and under the tweening, make sure snap is turned on. We need to test it to make sure the ball will follow the line. So if I was to play, now you can see it's following nicely along that line. If for some reason yours doesn't work when you snap and create these simple lines, the best thing to do would be to erase the line, undo your tween, and simply redraw the line and try it again. What we want to do next is convert this ball into a ball that has a long tail behind it, and we want the tail to follow the arc that the ball is going with as well. To do this, we need to convert our tweened animation into a frame-by-frame animation. So with that done, we're going to highlight all of the frames by clicking on the first one, hold down Shift, and clicking on the last frame, again, just on the ball layer. Then we can right-click on the selected frames and choose Convert to Frame-by-Frame Animation. We want to do this for every other frame. This is going to take your tween animation and chop it up into individual frame-by-frames that will give you the same animation and flow without doing all the tweens in between each one. Let's return to frame 1 in your timeline and select it. And to make sure I don't accidentally click on my guideline layer, I'm going to lock down that layer. We're going to take this one frame at a time, and I'm going to use my regular paintbrush tool. This is the classic paintbrush tool that's towards the middle of your toolbox. With this tool selected, we're going to go over to our tool properties and set your fill color to be the same color as your ball. In my case, it's going to be red. You can also test out the size of your brush and adjust it according to this. So you may want it to be larger or smaller, but since we're going to be painting a tail onto here, we definitely don't want it to be too large. In my case, for my ball, about 9 seems to be okay for what I'm working on. You may need to adjust the size for yours. As the ball moves, we want to have a tail kind of grow out from it. So starting here, we really can't see this first frame. I'm going to use the greater than key on my keyboard to advance to the next keyframe. Now that I see it, I'm simply going to click and I'm going to drag and paint on kind of a little bit of a tail. I'm going to advance 2 more frames. You can see it moves over again. I'm also holding down my space bar to get the little hand to move forward. Now, as it grows out, I need to see where it was before because I want to know if how long or how I painted it in the last frame. So this is where turning on your onion skin may come in handy. With this, we only need to see the frames behind us, so I'm going to adjust this so I can see those previous frames, and here they are here. And again, I want to paint it, and I'm following the curvature of my path. So I want my tail to look the same, but also to match up nicely with what's here. Advance 2 more frames. And again, maybe I want to see a little bit less. We'll move over. The size of the tail that you're drawing doesn't have to be terribly long, but we definitely don't want it to be very, very short. So I'm actually going to have mine kind of grow just a little bit, but this is about as long as I want mine to be. So take this 1 frame at a time, advancing every little bit, and carefully draw off and add on a tail structure to your circle. Advance forward 2 and draw off the next one. With this done, we can now back out. We'll go to show the whole frame. And let's test our animation. If we want to test it without seeing any of the lines, we can always go up to Control and choose Test. This will give you an idea of its movement across the way. So right now it's looking pretty good. It does look a little bit choppy, but that's simply because the way we're animating it is animating on the twos. With the red line finished, let's go down to our timeline and let's create a new folder above everything. And we'll call this our red line folder. I'm going to select both of our layers and simply drag them up into this particular folder. I can now close it out. This will keep it nice and easy to distinguish all of the animation timelines for the red in this one so that we can start creating a new one for the blue. Now in my instructions, when you create the lines for each, I'm also adding a separate challenge to it. For the blue line, I want it to go from one side to the other, but I want you to add an ease in and ease out tween to its motion. So it's going to start off slow and get faster, then slow down. In the yellow line, we're going to add an ease in, or excuse me, an ease out as it goes up and then slows into it, and then it eases in as it's falling down. So this will mimic an actual motion. Now when this happens, as the ball is moving quickly, the tail is going to be very long, but as it slows down, the tail is going to get shorter, and then it's going to get longer as it starts to fall back down again. For the green line, we're going to adjust the easing in and easing out as it enters a curve, and then it goes faster and slows down on a curve, and then speeds up as it goes out of it as well. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and speed through creating all of these and then talk about my final results. Now that I've finished each of the drawings, let's go back and show you how I broke down each one of these and some things to think about for all of the challenges. For the blue line, you can see how I've established it here. I've actually made a copy of it, so that's why you're seeing two of them. Once you establish your basic tween on this first keyframe, go into your tweening and set the easing effect to be an ease in, ease out, and you can choose whatever effect that you want to work in. I want to choose one of these higher ones like a quint ease in and ease out. This will allow it to start off really slow and then speed up as it goes along. Now when it comes time to break each of these individual frames apart, let's turn on the visibility of that ball. You can see that the spacing of it is going to space it out really, really far. Let's turn on our onion skinning so you can actually see this take place and be in effect. So on this particular layer, we'll unlock this layer. As it moves along, initially all of the balls are going to be very close together, but as they move farther apart, you can see the tail has to get longer. I tried to draw the tail from the starting point of one to the last point of the other. So as you see, as it's here, it follows and then ends right where the last tail was from there. Then as I stepped forward and I added that on, all I had to do was redraw that off for each one for those. So that's how I set up the blue line. I did a single ease in and ease out and then painted the tail according to that. For the yellow ball's timeline, we want it to ease out and slow down as it reaches the top and then ease in as it falls back down to the ground. So to do this, on our timeline for the yellow ball, after you've created your tween, go ahead and add another keyframe right at the 1 second mark. We can then go back to our first keyframe and let's add an ease out to this keyframe. So with it selected, go to the tweening, choose ease out. I'm going to use quad for this one. This will have it slow down as it reaches the top. And then finally we can choose that keyframe at the 1 second mark and have it ease in. We'll do quad again and it will slowly fall back down. As I've done with the others, when you turn on the visibility for that, you can see the tail is going to reach back As it gets closer and closer, the tail will get shorter and shorter. And then finally, as it falls down, the tail get longer and longer, reaching backwards to the previous ones as well. As for the green one goes, this one's unique because when we tween it, we want it to ease in and out along the way of your path. And so here's how I'm going to look at this one. As the ball is entering into the spiral, we want it to slow down whenever it goes uphill. So as it moves, I'm going to do a keyframe right about at the top point of whatever hill that it climbs. In this case, right around there. So for here, I'll insert a keyframe, hit F6. Then as it goes down and reaches the lowest point, in this case, the lowest point of the hill, this is where we want to insert another keyframe. Again, goes up, reaches the top, we'll insert a keyframe right about there, hit F6. Then as it goes down, the lowest point, we want to insert another keyframe. And then we'll let it ride off from there. You don't have to do this for everything that we have, but that'll be enough to get us started. Now let's think of how we want this to move. Starting with our first keyframe, moving up to here. So going into here, we want this to ease out. So we'll set it to an ease out quad. Then as it reaches the top point for the next keyframe, you want it to ease in. Then ease out, ease in, ease out. So basically you're going back and forth. So if this first one was an ease out, the second keyframe moment is going to be an ease in. And the third one will be an ease out. Next one will be an ease in. And then the next one will be an ease out. Now we can see how it will slow down and move along here. If you need to, you can adjust the placement of when you want it to ease in and ease out. So you can always check these points and move them along your timeline if you feel like it needs more time or less time between each of the moments. Once you're satisfied with this, you'll convert this to your solid keyframes, and the results will give you a tail that stretches when it's fast and squashes in when it's slow. Once finished, this will give you the results that look really good and also shows nice movement that follows the lines that you have. When you're finished, go up to File and make sure to save this as an animate file, and that's what you'll turn into the Moodle page.